Hello everyone, welcome to the sneak preview for Painting with Stillness. I wanted to go over with you some of the material that you can expect that we're going to be going through in the course. I'm going to talk through some of the painting that I did for the last course that I did, and you can see we'll talk through what are the different kinds of pieces you can expect, and so we're going to be looking at how to take the still life and translate that into paint and what's entailed. So I'm going to talk through that. So I'm very glad to have you here, and let's go into it. So what follows is an edited version of this still life painting that I did. It took about, I'd say it's about 3 hours of video footage that I edited down, go through and talk through some of the different steps with you. And we are going to be learning the foundational skills, how to translate what we're looking at onto a flat surface. And we're going to be doing that within a mindfulness practice. So learning how to slow down and move into our actual visual perception, becoming intimate with what we're seeing. And as we learn to figure out, well, what are the sizes, what are the proportions, very often feelings of that's not it, or self-judgment or frustration, and they come up. And so we're going to be learning, well, how do we meet that? And how do we slow down and make room for that and then go back to our seeing? So this isn't so much about doing it wrong and correcting it as much as it's about slowing down and moving into our actual visual perception. And it turns out that as we move into our actual visual perception, we get right here and we start to become very present. And that in turn helps the whole process of foundational skill development to occur much more easily, much more enjoyably. So with that said, let's move into the material.
So here's a photo of what I was looking at, and here you can see that I'm drawing all of the shapes, what I call the geometry, and I'll be teaching you how to analyze and measure and find the angles and the proportions, how to look at the situation in front of you and then translate that into a set of lines to describe its geometry. So as we continue that process, we begin to look for not just the outlines of the objects, but also the different values, how light or dark are the different shapes on the objects or of the objects. So when the light hits it and it moves into shadow, all of those things will be different shapes that we'll be looking for. And then we start laying in our tones, and I'm mixing, this is a very limited palette. We're just using a blue, a red, a yellow, and white, and working to mix. And so we'll be going over how do you mix and think about all the different aspects. So the values, how light or dark is the tone, how warm or cool, how intense or how muted is the tone. And so we'll be going over all of those pieces as well. And here you can see that I'm working with a fairly large brush, and it turns out that you want to use the right size brush to cover the area to put in the shape. Little brushes, it could be good if it's a small area, but if it's a large area, it just makes it easier to use a larger brush, and we'll go over all of those pieces as well. So when I move from one shape of the map, you can see I kind of mapped out my different shapes, and I'm putting down the paint and putting down the tone. Sometimes I'm coming to a hard edge, and then sometimes it gets a little softer as I move into the paint that's already next to it. So a lot will have to do with paint handling and how do you mix the right amount of paint or the right consistency, laying it down with the brush. Go over all of those pieces, and that has to do with edges. And I'm wanting to develop some kind of sense of space, you can see, starts to be around the object, and now I'm laying in a tone for the cup. So I started with what's next to the cup because really I want to find the cup, but it's a situation. I'm not just painting a cup by itself, and so I started with what you might call the background, so that when I do put down the paint for the cup, it starts to make sense. I can find how light or dark are those grays. And how do you get to a gray with red, blue, and yellow and white? So these are all chromatic grays, as opposed to making gray with just black and white. So we're not using black in this particular set of colors. And each one of these shapes, I'm giving a particular decision of tone. And so I'm not modeling, I'm giving each piece of the map, each shape gets a particular tone that I mix up on my palette and put down. And that allows me a way to make clear decisions. So a lot of painting has to do with clear decision making. And then if it's not accurate, if it's too light or too dark or too warm or too cool, I'll scrape it. I'll scrape it off of the canvas and put it down again. So now this is the inside of the cup that I'm working on, and I'm trying to get the right dark. It's a dark tone, laying that in. And I want to use my brush to make the form. So I'm not just filling in the shape like a coloring book, like flat. I'm actually trying to make the form with my brush, feeling the form as I use my brush, paint handling. And here I'm coming in with a lighter tone where the light hits the inside of the cup. So now I've moved on to, there's some dry lemons that I've placed in the still life situation, and I'm laying that down. One tone right up against the next tone. So I want to see how they meet, the tonal relationships. Now moving on to the blue wooden block. That's right in front. And getting the geometry right. When I first put down those lines, it wasn't quite the right size, so I went back and made it a bit larger. Laid that down. And now moving over to another dried fruit, a little darker. So when we mix our tones, it becomes very important to keep an eye on the values, how light or dark. And it gets confusing. We can get lost when we start looking for color. We could get confused and lose track of finding the right values. And so that takes some doing. It's a different part of the eye, actually, that sees the value and sees the color. Two different parts. And so it's two different parts of the brain, and we need to learn to really wire those parts together so they start to communicate together. And it makes it easier over time. And all of this, it's skill development. And so it takes some doing, and it takes patience. And the more we can slow down and see, the easier it is. And so a lot of the practice is just being able to slow down and see what's going on. What am I looking at? Here I'm laying in the top of that, and this is of that blue block. Trying to get those edges just right. The feel of that back corner. So that's the study. This is the piece that I demonstrated for the course.
So that was a pretty brief edited version of what's entailed going through and putting that still life together. It takes more time, of course, than what was offered in this brief video, but you get a sense of the kinds of questions and the kinds of work that's entailed. And as we go through the course and I am demonstrating and I'm talking through what I'm doing, and I'm also working with each of you as you're working with a still life at home or in your studio, and we look together at the material, and it's a supportive group, and we're checking it out, each of our work, and learning how to meet the process, how to work with frustration or confusion, and slowing down and being present, and really moving into a much more enjoyable process of skill development and learning how to see what's right in front of us. And that is truly a wonderful thing when we start to really see what's in front of us. Yeah. So if that sounds interesting to you, please join us. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and I'm very much looking forward to it. All right, take care, be well, bye-bye.